Hello? Today's case took place in Adelaide in 1999. Adelaide is a port city in southern Australia covering an area of 3,200 square kilometers, with a population of about 1 million people. The city has a developed economy and is the fifth largest city in Australia, attracting many people to work and live there. Today's story involves two main cases, both occurring in Adelaide. So what happened that year? Are these two cases related to each other? Let's turn back the clock to April 1999 to learn more. April 12th. Adelaide police received a call reporting that Maya Jakic, a 30-year-old woman, was missing. As soon as they received the call, Adelaide police began their investigation. They contacted Maya's friends and searched several areas she frequented, but did not find anything suspicious. On April 17, 1999, a police officer found a short note placed under the windshield wiper of a car while at the parking lot. He picked up the note and read its contents, feeling extremely surprised. The note read, "There is a dead girl in the bushes near the main road by the police station. This is not a joke. Better go there." After reading the note, the officer immediately reported the situation to his superiors. However, the superiors were not surprised upon hearing the news because on the night of April 12th, about 5 days earlier, they had received 2 anonymous phone calls regarding this matter. The caller said, "There seems to be a dead body in the bushes, but I'm not sure. Someone is lurking around the old Paynham police station. It looks like he's trying to break in, I think." At that time, after receiving the mysterious calls, the police went to the mentioned area to search, but found nothing, so they considered the call a potential prank. 5 days later, they received a note with similar content, leading the police to think that someone might just be causing trouble. However, out of responsibility, they still needed to recheck the issue. Therefore, they sent a new officer to the area for investigation. The location mentioned in the note was actually next to an abandoned police station, not an active one. Being meticulous, the new officer thoroughly searched every nook and cranny of the surrounding bushes. Indeed, he found the body of a young woman under a layer of leaves and branches and immediately reported it to his superiors. After an autopsy, the forensic team determined the cause of death to be strangulation with clothing. The time of death was identified as April 12th, 5 days prior. The police identified the victim as the 30-year-old woman Maya, who had been missing for several days. She was known to be a Croatian immigrant living in Adelaide. The forensic doctor concluded that Maya was murdered on April 12th, and the police received the anonymous note and discovered her body on April 17th. Notably, on the evening of April 12th, the police also received 2 anonymous phone calls in quick succession, and voice analysis suggested that the calls were made by the same person. After receiving the calls, the police had sent officers to search, but found nothing. It turned out there were 2 abandoned police stations on Paynham Road, and they had searched the wrong location. Based on the collected evidence, the police concluded that the 2 anonymous calls on the night of April 12th were made by the perpetrator. The note under the police car windshield was also believed to have been left by the perpetrator. It is likely that the perpetrator did this in hopes that Maya's body would be discovered as soon as possible, since the police did not find her on April 12th, prompting the writing of the anonymous note to remind them. After gathering these clues, the police immediately examined the anonymous letter and found no fingerprints or DNA on it. This indicated that the perpetrator was very arrogant, having disposed of the body near the police station and contacting the police after the crime as if playing with them and enjoying it. The victim, Maya, 30, was very kind. However, she had had major arguments with her mother and moved out right before the incident. After the incident, Maya's mother was very sad and regretful, always thinking that if they hadn't argued, Maya wouldn't have moved out on her own and wouldn't have fallen into such a situation. The police speculated that the perpetrator might have intended to sexually assault Maya but failed and ended up killing her. This seemed like a random crime. However, this also made the case more difficult to solve. The police investigated extensively but found no witnesses. All leads were cut off and they couldn't even identify a suspect. Coincidentally, during the time Maya was murdered, the Adelaide 500 supercar race was taking place locally. The police speculated that the perpetrator might have been among the spectators, but the crowd was too large, and after the race they returned to their countries. This made the case more complicated, and the police faced many difficulties and felt powerless. They couldn't make quick progress and couldn't find any clear evidence, so they decided to seek help from the public. The police released the 2 recordings and the mysterious note, hoping someone might recognize and provide useful information. The news spread, and the police station received a large number of calls from the public who claimed to recognize the perpetrator's voice and handwriting. However, after checking each individual, none matched the perpetrator's description, and the case once again reached a deadlock with no significant progress. In 2001, Adelaide police faced another case, an unexpected and more challenging one. On August 9, 2001, Adelaide police received a call reporting the disappearance of an 18-year-old Japanese student named Megumi Suzuki. The caller said she had not attended classes for several days. When the police investigated her student apartment, they found most of her daily items and books still in the room with no signs indicating she had left the apartment. On the bed was a teddy bear and a survey form. Her parents in Japan were notified, and they said that if she moved to a new place, she would take the teddy bear with her because it was her most cherished memento. The absence of the teddy bear worried her parents, and they decided to come to Australia immediately. The police checked the surveillance cameras around the apartment and found that on August 3rd, Suzuki left the student apartment to go to school at 7:41 a.m. After class, she left school and went to a shopping center alone. After leaving the shopping center, she suddenly disappeared. A maintenance worker told the police that he found a backpack by the roadside, and the police later confirmed it was Suzuki's backpack. Inside the backpack were her student ID, textbooks, cosmetics, bus tickets, a credit card, and other personal items. Notably, 2 items she frequently used, her mobile phone and CD player, were missing from the backpack. According to information from the bus ticket, she boarded the bus on the evening of August 3rd, but the bus was heading in the opposite direction of her apartment. When she got off, she went to a nearby gas station and bought a mobile phone SIM card. She then called her ex-boyfriend 12 times, but no one answered. Her ex-boyfriend lived near the gas station, so the police speculated that Suzuki might have returned near the bus stop to go home. During the investigation, the police approached Suzuki's ex-boyfriend. He seemed very cooperative and said that even though they had broken up, they remained good friends. Being a local, Suzuki often turned to him when she had problems, and he gave her a sense of safety. On the night of August 3rd, when the incident occurred, he was not at home but attending a party with friends. With this alibi, the police excluded him as a suspect. After Suzuki's parents arrived in Australia, they searched with the police for many days, but to no avail. Finally, they made a public statement on television, hoping someone would provide useful information to help them find their daughter as soon as possible. Days passed without any new progress in the case. Just as the police were struggling with the case of the Japanese girl, it seemed they had a new lead on the Maya case from 2 years prior. At that time, the police had posted an audio recording of an anonymous phone call on their website. The internet had become popular in Adelaide in the early 2000s, meaning many people had the opportunity to hear the 2 audio recordings of the anonymous phone call. The anonymous call stated, "There seems to be a dead body in the bushes, but I'm not sure. Someone is lurking around the old Payneham police station trying to break in, I think." The police's decision to release this audio recording seemed to have an effect. A whistleblower claimed he knew for sure who made the call and that it was his brother Mark Aaron Rust, born in 1965 from Adelaide. Rust was a long-time taxi driver with a criminal record. Since the age of 13, his hobby had been chasing beautiful girls and dreaming of having sex with them. One of Rust's pastimes was exposing himself to female students at a bus stop in North Adelaide. He was even accused of sexually assaulting his stepdaughter. The first official charges were filed in 1983, followed by 11 to 13 sexual crimes and several other offenses, including trespassing and arson. On August 16th, just 7 days after the Japanese student disappeared, a woman working late alone at a company on Kensington Street, Adelaide, was threatened with a knife and sexually assaulted by a stranger. To protect her life, she did not resist, but after the man left, she secretly noted his license plate number and reported it to the police. The police traced the man to Rust, the same person whose brother had reported the audio recording. With sufficient evidence, the police immediately arrested Rust. The police compared the handwriting on the note with his and found many similarities. While in custody, a fellow inmate provided surprising information. The cellmate said the CD player Rust was using wasn't his, but belonged to a Japanese girl. The police confiscated the CD player and contacted Suzuki's parents in Japan. Fortunately, they found the receipt for the CD player from Suzuki's landlord. After comparing the serial numbers, they matched. The informant also revealed that the Japanese girl had been murdered in a vacant lot and some of her clothes had been burned near a gas station. On the night of August 3rd before the incident, there was indeed a small fire near the gas station. Firefighters found traces of clothing and the remnants of the fire, but nothing else. The informant also said that after killing the girl, Rust had thrown her into a trash bin next to the vacant lot. The police then searched the trash bins near the vacant lot, but found nothing likely because they had been transported to the landfill. The police had to deploy a large force to search through the landfill, and they finally found the girl in October 2001. Rust was charged with the murders of 30-year-old Maya and 18-year-old Suzuki. Initially, he claimed not to know either of them, but faced with solid evidence, he eventually confessed. Rust had been married twice, both marriages ending in failure. He suffered from Klinefelter syndrome a chromosomal disorder affecting gender characteristics, which left an indelible mark on him. From a young age, he began to hate women and later became a psychopathic murderer. Regarding Maya's case, he explained that on April 12th, while driving his taxi on Paynham Road, he saw a girl walking alone. When he drove past her, he asked if she wanted a ride, but Maya refused. He persisted following her and asking again, but she refused again. Frustrated by his unmet desires, when Maya turned to walk away, he attacked her from behind. His initial intention was to rape Maya, but at the last moment he decided he wanted something more shocking. Rust claimed he did it for the thrill. Afterward, he left her body in the bushes near the old police station and called the police, wanting to see their horrified faces when they discovered the corpse. Regarding the 18-year-old Japanese girl named Suzuki, he stated that one evening while driving he saw a girl standing alone holding a phone near a gas station. Seeing that the area was deserted, he felt a surge of lust, approached her from behind, covered her mouth, and when she resisted, he killed her. Both victims were very young, especially Suzuki, who was just 18. Her parents had sent her to study in Adelaide, hoping she could learn about different cultures and experience a new life, but she met with misfortune here. If the police hadn't arrested Rust, he might have continued to slaughter more innocent people. In May 2003, the Adelaide court sentenced Rust to life imprisonment without parole. Such a punishment is very rare in Australia and is almost the highest sentence in the country. During the announcement of the court's decision, he was very indifferent and showed no remorse. However, what awaits him is the strict punishment of the law, although he has not yet paid for the cruel actions he committed. It is hoped that this verdict can provide some solace to the victims and their families. A case occurred in the 1990s, where in less than an hour, 7 people were brutally murdered. Due to the lack of clear witnesses and evidence, the investigation hit a dead end. So what happened that day? Let's go back to January 8th, 1993 to delve deeper into the story. January 8th, 1993 was a Friday. The story took place in the town of Palatine, Illinois, USA, a place known for its good living conditions and security. At 10:30 p.m., snow was still falling outside and the festive Christmas atmosphere hadn't entirely faded away. The phone at the Palatine Police Department suddenly rang. The on-duty officer assumed it was another call about a minor issue. However, upon answering, he heard a panicked voice on the other end saying, "Officer, my son Michael hasn't come home yet. His workplace usually closes at 9 p.m. and he's typically home by 9:30, but he's still not here. My son works at Brown's Chicken. I hope you can help investigate." Michael was a student at Palatine High School. To earn some extra money, he worked part-time at Brown's Chicken whenever he had free time. He usually went straight home after work, and if he had plans or needed to go out, he would inform his family, but today he hadn't done that. When the patrol police arrived at the restaurant, they found Brown's Chicken closed and its lights off. There were no signs of anything unusual, so they called back to the station reporting that there didn't seem to be any problems. Perhaps Michael was just hanging out somewhere. At 1 a.m., the phone at the police station rang continuously with multiple alarming calls reporting that their family members had gone missing without prior notice. Coincidentally, all these missing persons worked at Brown's Chicken. The on-duty officer realized something was wrong and immediately dispatched 2 more officers to the restaurant to investigate. Upon arrival, the officers found the store closed and the lights off. Peering through the window by the streetlight, they saw the restaurant was clean and tidy, with chairs placed on tables and no signs of anything unusual. They decided to check the back door. One officer pushed the door and found it was unlocked. They exchanged glances, drew their guns, and entered the restaurant. Inside, everything was silent. When they turned on the lights, a horrifying scene greeted them. Bloodstains covered the floor, but no one was in sight. The blood trails led to the cold room and freezer at the back of the kitchen. They moved to open the cold room door on the west side, and 2 bodies appeared before them. Horrified, they quickly moved to open the freezer door on the east side, revealing another gruesome sight. Bodies piled on top of each other, all with gunshot wounds. That scene left an indelible mark on the 2 officers. Initial assessments showed a total of 7 people had been killed, all from gunshot wounds. Some victims had not only been shot multiple times, but also stabbed repeatedly. The 2 victims in the cold room on the west side were the restaurant owner Richard Ehlenfelt, 50-year-old, and an employee, Thomas Menace, 32-year-old. The 5 victims in the freezer on the east side were Lynn Ehlenfelt, the owner's wife, 49-year-old Marcus, a full-time employee, 31-year-old. Guadalupe, a night shift cook, 36-year-old, and 2 part-time student employees, Rico L. Solis, 17-year-old, and Michael A. Castro, 16-year-old. Due to the severity of the case, the local police quickly coordinated with the Chicago Criminal Police, Illinois State Police, and the FBI, to form a 75-member Palatine project team and began a comprehensive investigation. Investigators examined every detail at the scene, took hundreds of photos, and meticulously documented the details. They found clues at the scene. Investigators discovered a mop with bloodstains next to the store's east door, which showed signs of being cleaned. This suggested that the perpetrator might have used the mop to clean up the blood after committing the crime, indicating that the perpetrator had a calm demeanor or was very familiar with the store. He knew that no one would come to the store after it closed, so he didn't hurriedly flee but stayed to clean the scene. On the store's roof and on the victims, investigators found at least 20 bullets, possibly from a .38 caliber revolver, but they couldn't trace the gun's origin. An unusual phenomenon in the store was that there was one chair near the ordering counter placed correctly while all other chairs were flipped upside down on the tables. Flipping the chairs was done to facilitate cleaning the store. The chair near the counter indicated that although business hours were over, there was still a customer in the store. Was this last customer the perpetrator, or someone who knew something? The store's revenue that day was between $1,800 and $1,900, but the cash register was empty. This suggested that the perpetrator's goal might have been robbery, but why did he brutally murder innocent people? In the cash register of the chicken restaurant, investigators found a receipt with the timestamp 9:07 p.m. on January 8th. This was the last receipt of the day. The last customer had ordered a fried chicken combo, 2 small buns, a pack of fries, and a drink. The store was cleaned thoroughly, with only one trash bin containing some chicken bones, fries, and other trash like napkins that hadn't been emptied. Police weren't sure if this bag of trash would be helpful in solving the case, but they collected and froze it. After the incident, the Palatine Special Investigation Team continuously checked nearby residents and investigated all friends and relatives of the victims. They also looked into former employees of the chicken restaurant but found no useful leads. The perpetrator seemed to have vanished without a trace. During the investigation, the police made a mistake. 2 weeks after the incident, they remembered that there was a 24-hour gas station near the crime scene with surveillance cameras. Unfortunately, all the footage from those cameras had been overwritten. The special investigation team of hundreds of officers continued investigating for a year, only to determine that the perpetrator's motive was robbery, without any clear other reasons. The case thus hit a dead end. Under public pressure and the inability to solve the case, the Chicago police thought of enlisting the help of the famous physical evidence analysis expert, Dr. Lee Chung-yu. He is a renowned Chinese-American detective, often referred to as the modern Sherlock Holmes or the Chinese detective god. After receiving the invitation, Dr. Lee began his work. On January 28, 1994, a year after the Browns chicken massacre, Dr. Lee was invited to Palatine to join the investigation. He thoroughly studied numerous case files, physical evidence, and hundreds of crime scene photos to recreate the crime scene. Through the reconstruction, he concluded that the scene was consistent with a robbery-murder case. The trash bin contents matched the meal purchased at 9:07 p.m. that day. Dr. Lee discovered that the last customer only ate the chicken wings from the combo meal, leaving the rest almost untouched. Therefore, it could be concluded that the person's purpose for coming to the store was not to eat. After placing the last order, all the employees in the chicken restaurant were killed. The scene left no significant evidence, suggesting that the perpetrator had prepared very carefully before acting, choosing the right time when the store was closed to commit the crime. Overall, the last customer was likely the main suspect. According to the last receipt, the order was placed at 9:07 p.m., while the store closed at 9 p.m. In the USA, there is a strong sense of time, and they are very rigid about it. When business hours are over, even if a customer arrives, they won't open the door. However, that day, despite it being past closing time and the store having been cleaned, they still accepted the order. This suggests that the customer might have been an old acquaintance, and the staff violated the rules to extend their working hours to serve him. Only the chicken wings in the combo meal were eaten, so Dr. Lee speculated that the perpetrator could be black or Hispanic because the USA is a multicultural nation and each ethnicity has its own eating habits. White people usually prefer chicken breasts, Asians prefer drumsticks, while blacks and Hispanics like chicken wings. According to the receipt, the combo only included 1 chicken wing, but the bones in the trash indicated 2 wings. It's likely that a staff member added an extra wing further, proving that the perpetrator was an acquaintance. The chicken wing bones were chewed on both ends, which would surely leave the suspect's saliva. Dr. Lee used DNA technology, which was newly developed at the time, to extract DNA from the chicken wing bones. In 1994, very few people knew about DNA technology. Even the Palatine police, where the case occurred, hadn't heard of it and didn't know what DNA was. However, because DNA technology was not advanced enough at that time, the small amount of saliva extracted from the chicken bones was insufficient for analysis. so Dr. Lee suggested preserving the sample for future analysis when the technology improved. As time passed, the case saw no breakthroughs until 1998, when DNA technology had made significant advancements and the police successfully analyzed the suspect's DNA. However, the USA had not yet established a complete DNA database, and manually comparing DNA was labor-intensive, time-consuming, and costly. By then, it had been 5 years since the incident, and they still couldn't find anyone matching the suspect's DNA. With no new evidence emerging, the case remained unsolved. On March 25, 2002, 9 years after the incident, a woman named Ann Lockett provided the police with a crucial lead. According to Ann, her ex-boyfriend James Degorski and a person named Juan Luna were the main perpetrators of the Browns chicken massacre. In her testimony, Ann revealed that the day after the incident, her boyfriend James Degorski called her and told her to turn on the TV, where news of the 7 murders at Brown's Chicken was being broadcast. He proudly claimed responsibility for the crime. Not long after, James and Juan Luna detailed the incident to her, but she didn't dare report it to the police because James had threatened to kill her if she revealed the information. She lived in fear every day and didn't dare report to the police. After some time, she and James broke up. 9 years after the incident, she confided the entire story to her current boyfriend, who encouraged her to go to the police, and she finally dared to tell everything. Initially, the police were very skeptical because they had received thousands of leads since the case occurred, none of which were useful. However, when Ann described the crime in detail, the police paid close attention, particularly to a detail that had never been made public. She described how a mop with blood had been used to clean up vomit and French fries. When one of the victims was shot, he vomited the French fries he had eaten. To make sure the person was dead, James used the mop to prod his body. To avoid drawing attention, the police began secretly investigating the 2 suspects. They discovered that Juan had previously worked at the Brown's Chicken restaurant and was Hispanic, which matched Dr. Lee's hypothesis. At the time, Juan had avoided suspicion by providing an alibi. The police found Eileen, who had provided Juan's alibi. After questioning, Eileen admitted that she had lied to the investigators because in reality, after James and Juan committed the crime, she had hidden the truth. They immediately approached Eileen and paid her $50, asking her to help provide an alibi. Additionally, Juan's DNA matched perfectly with the DNA collected from the chicken bones 4 years earlier. On May 16, 2002, the police successfully arrested the 2 suspects. After hours of questioning, they finally confessed to the crime. At the time of the crime, both were still high school students with criminal records for substance abuse and a history of torturing small animals, being considered troublemakers in the area. In a 44-minute confession video, Juan described what had happened in the restaurant on January 8, 1993. That night, they wanted to do something big to seek a thrill. Because they had previously worked at Brown's Chicken, they knew the store always closed at exactly 9 p.m. and had no burglar alarm system. Moreover, they were very familiar with the store's environment, so they chose it as their target. On the night of January 8, 1993, it was heavily snowing. Juan entered the store at the last minute before closing time. As expected, there were no customers left in the store except for the owner and the staff. He ordered a portion of fried chicken, and the staff recognized him, so not only did they allow him to place an order after 9 p.m., but they also knew he liked chicken wings, so they gave him an extra piece. Juan sat eating the chicken wings and waited for James to arrive. As soon as James entered, he locked the back door of the store, put on gloves, and shot at a staff member who tried to flee after noticing something unusual. Then he continued to use the gun to herd all the employees into the cold room and freezer in the kitchen, followed by a brutal massacre. According to Juan's confession, initially they only intended to rob the place and had no intention of killing anyone. However, after encountering resistance, they lost control and killed everyone in the store. However, this story clearly did not align with their actions at the scene because they had brought a lot of spare ammunition. After committing the murders, they were calm enough to clean up the scene before taking the day's revenue, indicating that their motive was not simply robbery. On May 10, 2007, based on DNA evidence and the testimonies of 2 witnesses, Juan was convicted of murdering 7 people. However, because one juror steadfastly opposed the death penalty, it was not passed. Ultimately, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. On September 29, 2009, based on the testimonies of his ex-girlfriend Anne and Eileen, who had provided the alibi, James was also convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. From the time the 7 victims were murdered in 1993 until the suspects were arrested in 2002 and convicted in 2007, the case spanned 14 years. During those 14 years, the families of the victims endured an immense loss unimaginable to ordinary people. Meanwhile, the case also cast a gloomy shadow over the town of Palatine. After the incident, Brown's chicken sales dropped by 35%, leading to the closure of 100 restaurants in the Chicago area. The site of the incident remained vacant for many years, was later converted into a laundromat, but eventually failed and was demolished in April 2001. Today, a Chase Bank stands there. In reality, many cold cases remain unsolved due to the technological limitations of their time. This does not mean they will never be solved. Remember, there is no perfect crime in this world. A hair salon owner faced misfortune because of her job. Although the perpetrator was seen by witnesses fleeing the scene at night, due to a lack of necessary evidence, the case became an unsolved mystery. However, 15 years later, something unexpected happened. The crime occurred in Spartanburg County, South Carolina, USA. The main character of the story is Dana Saterfield, the 27-year-old owner of a hair salon. She was not only beautiful but also adept at handling relationships, which attracted many regular customers to her salon. Dana was married and had 2 children. Over time, she and her husband encountered marital issues leading to many complications. Due to these problems, they decided to separate. Shortly after their separation, something terrible happened to her. What exactly happened? Let's go back to July 31st, 1995 to delve deeper into this case. July 31st, 1995 was a Monday. Dana Saterfield, 27-year-old, was working in her hair salon as usual. She was both the owner and the sole stylist, so she often worked late. At 6:30 p.m., she bought a bottle of cleaner from a salesperson named Shirley, then returned to the salon and continued her work. At 8:11 p.m., Shirley had to leave for an errand. On her way back to her shop, she passed by Dana's salon and saw Dana still tidying up inside. They greeted each other and Shirley continued on to her shop. Around 8:30 p.m., Shirley was getting ready to go home. She stood waiting for a ride under a streetlight in front of Dana's salon. At that moment, she noticed the lights in the salon suddenly turned off, followed by strange noises from inside. She then saw a man jump out of the salon window. When he noticed her standing nearby watching him, he quickly pulled his gray t-shirt over his head and fled towards the side of the building. Frightened by what she had just witnessed, Shirley ran in the opposite direction and reached a nearby shop to call the police. After the man jumped out of the salon window, he ran one way, while Shirley in her panic ran the other way. They crossed paths again in front of a nearby shop and both were stunned for a few seconds. Shirley got a good look at the man's face, which scared him, causing him to turn and run away until he was out of Shirley's sight. Shirley at that moment was in a frenzy, not knowing what to do. She tried to flag down passing cars for help, but since it was almost 9 p.m., there were very few cars on the road. Drivers likely thought Shirley wanted a ride and ignored her. After multiple unsuccessful attempts to stop a car, Shirley ran to the nearest shop that was still open and called the police. Upon receiving the call, the police quickly arrived at Dana's salon. Inside, they found her sitting with her head bowed on the floor, her back leaning against a cylindrical water heater in the bathroom. A rope was tied around her neck with the other end attached to the water heater. Dana showed no signs of life. Her body had numerous bruises and bloodstains, indicating a violent struggle had occurred, ending in her tragic death. Except for the bathroom, the other areas of the salon showed no signs of disorder. Dana's bag was still on the table and her keys were next to it. The cash register was untouched and no other valuables were missing. Therefore, the police ruled out robbery as a motive. Forensic experts arrived at the scene and used a special ultraviolet light, which can detect the presence of semen. Indeed, there was a reaction at the scene. However, specific results would require further lab tests to identify the perpetrator's DNA. Dana's husband, Mike Saterfield, rushed to the crime scene after hearing from neighbors and was detained by the police for questioning. He stated that he and Dana had 2 children, but their marriage had encountered issues leading to a separation. They had been living apart for a while but were not divorced. He was deeply saddened to hear about his wife's murder. The police took his fingerprints and found a match with a print on the water heater. Dana was a hard-working, business-savvy individual who treated her customers well, yet she was murdered in her own shop. Recently, she had disagreements with her husband, which led the police to quickly identify Mike as the primary suspect. The police then contacted Shirley, the witness from that day, and asked if she had clearly seen the murderer that night. Shirley confirmed she had seen the man's face clearly. He was a white male with brown or blonde wavy hair, about 1.73 meters tall, and weighing around 65 kilograms. An artist drew a portrait of the suspect based on Shirley's description, but it did not resemble Mike at all. The window through which the perpetrator escaped was very small, and Mike was too large to have fit through it. If he had tried, he would have surely gotten stuck. So why were his fingerprints on the water heater? Mike explained that he was a plumber and had installed the water heater in the salon himself, witnessed by a colleague. The police investigated and suspected that Mike might have hired someone to carry out the murder, but they found no leads or evidence to support this theory. Ultimately, Mike was ruled out as a suspect. Around 8:40 p.m. on the night of the murder, another witness drove past the hair salon. The driver saw a suspicious man standing next to a blue Ford SUV with custom rims. The witness said the man had threatened him. Let's review the timeline of events. 8:11 p.m., Dana greeted Shirley, a salesperson. By 8:30 p.m., Shirley saw a man jump out of the salon window. At 8:40 p.m., a suspicious man was seen standing next to a Ford SUV. This suggests the man next to the SUV could be the killer. Finding that vehicle might lead to the murderer. The police then issued a bulletin with the suspect's sketch and the vehicle in hopes of finding useful leads. After the bulletin was issued, a man working near the salon reported that on his way to work that evening he saw a large blue and white Ford SUV parked between two big trucks. He was a car enthusiast and remembered the vehicle's details vividly. The police immediately searched for all vehicles matching that description in the area around the time of the murder. They found 4 surveillance camera clips showing a similar vehicle with the same license plate belonging to Mary Ann Vick. The police visited Mary, who initially cooperated with the investigation, revealing that her son had driven the car out on the night of the murder. However, she insisted her son was not involved in the crime. She explained that her car's resemblance to the police's described vehicle had led to constant surveillance, making her very uncomfortable. As a result, she put up a sign on the back of her car stating that it had been checked and asked people not to report it again. Additionally, she filed complaints with local authorities about the police continually bothering her family and expressed her desire not to cooperate further. Unable to continue cooperating with Mary, the police brought a witness from that night to view her car from a distance. The witness stated that although the car looked very similar, he wasn't sure if it was the one he saw that night. Due to the witness's uncertainty, this lead was cut off. At this point, the lab's crime scene report was released. The scene suggested that Dana had likely been raped, but what was missing was the lab's failure to find the perpetrator's DNA on her. A forensic doctor recalled being present at the scene and using ultraviolet light to detect the presence of semen, which was evident then. Why were there no traces now? Finding this puzzling, the forensic doctor decided to re-examine all the items at the scene. Eventually, the doctor successfully extracted the perpetrator's DNA from a handkerchief. However, the police couldn't identify any other suspects, so they couldn't perform a DNA comparison. The case fell into a deadlock and remained unsolved for a long time. Due to a lack of evidence and new leads, the case became a cold case. In 2005, 10 years after the incident, the police hadn't completely given up on the investigation, and occasionally new leads would emerge. At that time, a new sheriff was appointed in Spartanburg County. Upon taking office, he ordered the reopening of the unsolved case from 10 years prior. He believed that the case remained unsolved only due to the lack of technology at the time. He assigned Detective Thomas Smith to reinvestigate the case. Detective Smith, upon receiving his assignment, met with a retired FBI profiler. A profiler is a specially trained professional who sketches the psychological profile of criminals by analyzing their modus operandi, the layout of the crime scene, and the characteristics of the crime. From this, they predict the personality traits and even the next actions of the criminal. After learning the details of the case, the retired profiler described the perpetrator to Detective Smith as follows. He is a young white male who knew the people around Dana, understood her work schedule, had visited her salon before, liked Dana, had a low level of education, and left the area after the incident. While Detective Smith began to reinvestigate the case to see if anyone matched this profile, Dana's mother unexpectedly called the police to provide a new witness. The new witness was Michael Pace, a 27-year-old employee at an auto repair shop. By then, it had been 10 years since the incident, and Dana's daughter was now 18 years old. One day, Dana's daughter brought her car to Michael's shop for repairs. As two mechanics were talking, one mentioned to the other that the girl was Dana's daughter. Seeing how grown up she was, the other mechanic, Michael, was flooded with old memories and felt a pang of guilt. Michael then went to Dana's mother and said he thought he might know something about the leads from the case 10 years ago. The police soon met with Michael. He said that while he knew some leads and was willing to share them, the police had to agree to keep his information confidential. He had been threatened in the past, which made him fearful and unwilling to be involved in the case. The police agreed to his request. Michael revealed that he thought his friend Jonathan Christian Vick might be the perpetrator. Jonathan was the son of Mary, the woman who owned the car, resembling the suspect's vehicle. At the time, Mary refused to cooperate with the police investigation. Jonathan was only 17 years old. Being a minor, Mary did not allow the police to interrogate him. After the witnesses dismissed the car, the police never returned to Mary's house. Michael continued stating that he had a close relationship with Jonathan and they often drove around together. That year, Michael worked at a bowling alley. On the day of the incident, while he was on his way home from work, he ran into Jonathan and they chatted for a bit. During their conversation, Jonathan mentioned Dana saying that she had 2 kids and that she and her husband were having marital problems and were separated. Even though Dana is older and looks a bit aged, I like her, Jonathan said. It seemed Jonathan knew a lot about Dana despite her being much older than him. Michael thought he was joking and started teasing him, which unexpectedly made Jonathan very angry. Michael also mentioned that later that night after dropping him off at home, Jonathan said he needed to get a haircut even though it was very late and all the barbershops were closed. Michael told Jonathan to wait until the next day, but Jonathan insisted on going to Dana's salon. A few days after the incident, Michael was playing pool at a local pool hall when he ran into Jonathan again. Jonathan told him, "I'm joining the army. I won't be back for a long time." He added, "Whatever I told you before, don't tell anyone. If you do, I'll kill you." Michael was puzzled, not knowing what he was talking about. Jonathan then said, "This is the last time we'll talk." They never saw each other again. From Michael's description, the police believed that Jonathan fit the retired FBI profiler's description. A young white male, familiar with Dana's work and schedule, who frequented her salon and who left town after the incident. The police then compared the sketch drawn from witness Shirley's description at the time with Jonathan's picture, and they found a striking resemblance. The police identified Jonathan as the prime suspect and began investigating him, but Jonathan had disappeared by then. The police contacted an ex-girlfriend of his who stated that Jonathan had been abusive, even pushing her into a ditch and beating her severely. Once, while driving past Dana's salon, Jonathan told her about the incident there, saying, "The police want to pin it on me, but they have no proof. If you try to leave me, you'll disappear just like that." Further investigation revealed that Jonathan had once been married to a woman named Heather Rena Sellers, who disappeared on the afternoon of September the 24th, 2002. On that day, Jonathan had picked Heather up from her aunt's house and they went to a bar together. Heather was never seen again. Jonathan was the only suspect at the time, but wasn't charged due to lack of evidence. 2 months later, Detective Smith finally contacted Jonathan. Smith told Jonathan that he was reviewing old cases, including Dana's. He wanted to meet Jonathan on a Saturday to ask some questions, to which Jonathan agreed, but then never showed up. With all the evidence pointing towards Jonathan, Detective Smith requested a mandatory DNA sample from Jonathan, which was granted. 2 weeks later, the police forcibly obtained Jonathan's DNA. Comparing it to the DNA found on the comb 10 years earlier, the results confirmed that Jonathan was the man the police had been looking for. In October 2005, the police arrested Jonathan and charged him with murder. Jonathan said, "I don't know anything about this. I'm not involved." In November 2006, the case went to trial. Initially, Jonathan denied his guilt, but with overwhelming evidence, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. He cried, claiming Dana's killer was still free and that he was going to jail unjustly. Regarding Heather, Jonathan's wife, who disappeared in 2006, the police found blood and blonde hair in an abandoned car. Many believed the blood and hair belonged to Heather, but this has never been confirmed. Although Jonathan remains the main suspect in Heather's disappearance, he has never been charged. In 2010, while in prison, Jonathan severely beat another inmate, resulting in an additional conviction and a ban on parole until 2035. After 10 years, the case was finally solved. However, the fate of Jonathan's wife remains unknown. Whether her disappearance is related to Jonathan remains a mystery that may never be solved. What are your thoughts on Jonathan? Do you think his wife is still alive? Have you ever lost something in your room that you were sure was just there but couldn't find? Today's missing person story feels somewhat like that. A medical student and his classmate walked into a bar in a shopping mall and then mysteriously vanished under the watchful eyes of the mall's surveillance cameras. This incident later garnered significant attention in the United States. It is the case of Brian Schaefer, which happened in 2006 in Ohio, USA. Ohio is a state in the northeastern United States with Columbus as its capital, located in the geographical center of the state. Columbus covers an area of 578 square kilometers and has a population of about 900,000 people, making it the 14th largest city in the United States. Many consider Columbus a typical American city, and today's story takes place there. The main character in the story is Brian Schaefer, 27 years old. He was a student at Ohio State University and had earned a bachelor's degree in microbiology. After completing his undergraduate studies, he continued his education at the university's medical school. Brian was not only handsome, but also had a cheerful personality and excellent academic performance. His parents were very proud of having such a son, and his family also included a younger brother. Brian's family was very harmonious, and it could be said that Brian's future was bright. However, on a spring night in 2006, Brian vanished into thin air. What happened that day, and how did Brian disappear? Next, we will turn back the time to March the 31st, 2006, to delve deeper into the story. March 31st, 2006 was a Friday. For Brian and other students, it was a highly anticipated day as it marked the end of the semester and the beginning of spring break. Typically, schools in the US have three major holidays: summer break, winter break, and spring break. Spring break usually falls around March and lasts from 7 to 10 days. That day, Brian's father took him to a steakhouse for dinner. During the meal, Brian told his father that he wanted to go drinking with a friend after dinner. At that time, Mr. Randy thought that his son was now grown up and needed some personal space. Besides, Brian had just gone through a stressful exam period, and relaxing a bit now would be good, so he didn't stop him. At 9:30 p.m., Brian arrived at a bar near the campus located on the second floor of a shopping mall. This is the entrance to the shopping mall. After entering, you can take the escalator to the second floor. Close to the escalator on the second floor is the bar he went to named Ugly Tuna Saloona. Brian drank with his close friend and roommate Clint Florence, and they had a great time chatting. At 9:56 p.m., Brian had a phone call with his girlfriend Alexis Wagner. They had been dating for a year and their relationship was going well. They had booked a flight to Miami for the following Monday, April 3rd, to enjoy a fantastic spring break there. They had a brief conversation over the phone, and Brian expressed his excitement for the upcoming vacation. Finally, Brian told his girlfriend that he loved her, and the entire call seemed very normal. After the call with his girlfriend, Brian and his close friend decided to go bar hopping, meaning they would visit multiple bars in one night. They then left the shopping mall and went to another location about 2 kilometers away, as the other bar was in the Arena District of Columbus. At 12 a.m., Clint called a friend named Meredith Reed and asked if she wanted to go out for some drinks. Meredith agreed. At 12:30 a.m., Meredith drove to the bar where Brian and Clint were, and after some conversation, she drove the two of them back to the original bar. They parked in the first floor parking lot, and the three of them entered through the main entrance of the shopping mall. At 1:15 a.m., the mall's surveillance camera captured the three of them on the escalator. The person on the left, leaning on the handrail, was Brian, while his two friends followed behind. They were chatting as they went up the escalator, then the three of them entered a bar on the second floor to continue drinking. A little later, Brian stepped outside perhaps to get some fresh air. At 1:55 a.m., the camera caught Brian talking to two young women, after which he disappeared from view. That was the last time the surveillance camera recorded Brian. The bar's closing time was 2 a.m., and patrons would start to leave shortly after. At that time, Clint and Meredith hadn't left yet because they didn't know where Brian had gone. They called his phone but got no answer and didn't see him return. So they stood up to search around. Clint even went to the bathroom to look for him but couldn't find him. After a while, the bar closed and all the other customers had left. They thought Brian might have felt tired and gone home because his house was only 2 blocks away from the bar and it would take about 10 minutes to walk there. At 2:09 a.m., after searching with no results, they left the bar. The next morning, Brian's girlfriend Alexis called his phone, but there was no answer. She even tried calling multiple times, but still no one picked up. At that time, Alexis found it a bit strange and thought maybe he had drunk too much with his friends and was too tired to wake up early. In the afternoon, she continued calling, but still got no response. A day passed, and she kept calling him, but each call went to voicemail and no one answered. Now she felt something was wrong and began to worry because the next day was Monday and they were supposed to go on a vacation to Miami together. Why had he suddenly lost contact? Thinking this, she called Brian's father to ask about his situation. He said he hadn't been able to reach his son since that dinner. He reassured Alexis that maybe his son was planning to propose to her during the vacation and advised her not to worry too much and get ready for the trip the next day. The next morning, Monday, April 3rd, 2006. Alexis went to the airport with her luggage. She thought maybe Brian just wanted a few quiet days to himself, but today he would definitely show up at the airport. To her disappointment, Brian never appeared. Realizing that something must have happened to Brian, she immediately called the police. The police then sent officers to the last location where Brian was seen, and the official investigation began. Next, let's review Brian's schedule for that night. At 9:30 p.m., Brian arrived at the bar. At 9:56 p.m., he called his girlfriend. At 10 p.m., the two left to go to another bar. At 12 a.m., Clint called their friend Meredith to join them for drinks. At 12:30 a.m., the three returned to the original bar. At 1:15 a.m., the three entered the bar. At 1:55 a.m., Brian was seen standing at the entrance, talking to two girls. At 2 a.m., the bar closed, and at 2:09 a.m., Brian's two friends left. According to two security guards, they vaguely remembered Brian returning to the bar after talking to the two girls. Upon investigation, the police found that the two girls in the video were complete strangers to Brian. They had just met and chatted at the entrance. As you can see in the image of the bar area, opposite the bar is a cinema, and next to it is an area with painted walls and an exit sign. However, this image is from 2018, as in 2006. There was no cinema in the shopping mall, and there was no exit next to it. In 2006, at the time of the incident, the entire shopping center was only partially operational. Only the bar on the second floor and a few other shops were open, while other areas were under renovation or vacant. The only way to enter and exit the shopping center was through the main entrance, and then by escalator. If one entered and exited this way, it would certainly be caught on camera. However, the surveillance cameras only captured Brian entering the building and not leaving it that day. Theoretically, Brian could have walked through an unopened construction area and exited through the building's construction hallway. This path was not monitored by surveillance cameras and was typically used by construction workers during the day. At night, the construction area was pitch dark as there were no lights, and it was difficult to see the way. There were also clear warning signs outside the construction area. Under normal circumstances, people wouldn't enter such an area if they saw these warnings. However, the police brought in sniffer dogs to search, but found no evidence that Brian had passed through the construction area and exited the building. Columbus is an area with the most surveillance cameras in the entire state of Ohio. The police searched the nearby streets and collected surveillance footage from other shops, but still found no trace of Brian. They also interviewed Brian's friends and family, asking all the tough questions about his relationships, temperament, recent unusual behaviors, and even questions about drugs, enemies, and his vulnerabilities. It turned out that his mother had died of bone cancer 4 weeks earlier, which had left Brian deeply saddened recently. However, his girlfriend mentioned that during their phone call on Friday night, she didn't notice anything unusual in his mood. His two friends who were with him that night also thought he seemed normal and okay. His mobile phone, credit card, and bank account hadn't been used since his disappearance. Those involved began to lose hope that he might still be alive, as there had been no information about him up to that point. Discussions about the case continued on social media, and people proposed many different theories. One theory suggested that Brian might have accidentally died from drinking too much while at the bar. The bar staff, fearing responsibility, could have hidden him somewhere in the staff-only area and later disposed of his body. This could explain why the shopping mall's surveillance cameras didn't capture Brian leaving the bar. He might have remained in the building, hidden in an area accessible only to the bar staff. Although the bar had closed that night, some patrons stayed behind. If something had happened to Brian, those people might have seen it. Additionally, if a customer collapsed inside the bar, someone would have surely witnessed or discovered it. The initial reaction would be to call the police, but there was a scenario that made this theory plausible. Brian's death wasn't accidental. Instead, he might have offended someone in the bar and was then retaliated against by the bar staff or management, who hid his body in a secret location. Another theory suggested that at the time, Brian was too drunk to think clearly. He had drunk too much and needed to go outside to vomit in an area where no one was around. The construction area inside the shopping mall was an ideal choice. At around 2 a.m., the construction area had no lights and was pitch dark. Brian got lost after entering, forgot where he had come from, and couldn't find the exit. He was so drunk that he staggered around the area and accidentally fell into a deep hole and became unconscious. No one could have thought that he was there to rescue him. During those days, the shopping center was under heavy construction and the workers were unaware. Therefore, they filled the holes with cement during the day, and Brian became trapped in the cement. By the time the police were called on Monday, it was too late. This is why when the police brought sniffer dogs to the construction area, they seemed to find some traces of Brian inside the building, but not outside. After Brian's disappearance, Clint's varied behavior made people suspect he was involved. Clint had gone drinking with Brian and then called their friend Meredith to join them, almost as if creating an alibi. After some time, the police ordered Clint and Meredith to take a lie detector test to ensure the truthfulness of their statements. Meredith quickly agreed to the police's request, but Clint unexpectedly refused. He believed he had told everything he knew and didn't need to lie, and he also hired a lawyer to protect his rights, refusing to cooperate with the police. A month after Brian's disappearance, Clint moved from Ohio to Tennessee to avoid trouble. He was tired of the media's pursuit and didn't want to live under such scrutiny anymore. Therefore, he changed his name from Clint Florence to William Florence and cut off all contact with Brian's family. Clint's actions, though suspicious, were understandable, as he just wanted to avoid being bothered by the media. The key point is that if he were to lie, everything would have to match the surveillance footage. Brian was last seen on surveillance footage at 1:55 a.m. and Clint and his friend left the shopping center at 2:09 a.m. Within those 14 minutes, Clint couldn't have killed and disposed of Brian without anyone noticing. Therefore, although Clint didn't want to cooperate with the police investigation, the police gradually dismissed suspicion of him. Besides these theories, there were many others. One of them was the smiley face killer theory, a group of criminals targeting men believed to be privileged. Many people thought Brian might have been targeted by them and dumped into a nearby river. Upon checking, there was indeed a river flowing south near the area where Brian disappeared. Additionally, on New Year's Day, Brian's father consulted a psychic. The psychic said that his son was underwater near a bridge pillar. The police then sent special personnel to focus on searching downstream in nearby rivers, but found no traces. Another theory was that the area around the bar had a high crime rate. Brian might have walked through the construction area that night and left the shopping center while intoxicated. On his way, he might have accidentally offended some gang members, leading to something unexpected happening. Of course, any theory could be possible until the truth is revealed. However, the limitation is that the investigation cannot progress if it's based solely on speculation and assumptions without supporting evidence. Brian's father continually sought the media's help, openly talking to reporters and crying on camera. He covered the city walls with information about his son's disappearance, organized prayer vigils and searches. He even attended a Pearl Jam rock concert to speak about the disappearance between songs urging people to provide information about his son or pleading for Brian to come back to him. On the evening of September 14th, 2008, a storm devastated the central Ohio area and Randy's backyard. His body was found the next day. Many believe he had an accident while trying to clean up debris after the storm. This makes the fate of Brian's family particularly tragic, especially for his father. He lost his wife to cancer. A month later, his son disappeared, and 2 years after that, he faced his own misfortune. The only surviving member of the family is Brian's younger brother, who has remained mostly silent since his brother's disappearance. His friends say he needs a break from the pain and wants closure to the whole story, even if it doesn't have a happy ending. However, he doesn't know what to do or where to start. 17 years have passed without any information about Brian, making this an unsolved case. Brian's girlfriend, Alexis, has since married, but she still hasn't forgotten him. Her new husband is kind and supports her continued search for Brian. She has even created a website called finbrianschaffer.com to aid in the search. So where did Brian go? Is he still alive? Do you think he is alive or dead? Leave your thoughts below to let everyone know. The story I want to tell you today took place in Connecticut, USA. This state has a mild climate and a long coastline around Long Island Sound, which has contributed to its long-standing maritime industry. Today, Connecticut is known as one of the wealthiest states in the USA. Moreover, it is home to prestigious universities such as Yale University, which attracts outstanding students from around the world. In 1986, a particularly challenging case unfolded here, perplexing investigators. The perpetrator had acted with extreme cunning, making it difficult for local police to solve the case for a long time. So what were the specific details of this incident? Let's rewind to December 1st, 1986, to delve deeper into the case. December 1st, 1986 was a Monday. Connecticut had just experienced a major snowstorm. Despite the bad weather, people were not greatly affected. After the snowstorm subsided, residents began going out shopping to prepare for the upcoming Christmas holidays. On that day, the police in Newtown, Connecticut received a call from a private detective named Keith Mayo. He reported that his client, Hella Lork Nielsen, had disappeared a few days earlier. He believed that her husband, Richard Crafts, was involved in her disappearance, so he called the police to request their assistance in investigating the matter. This private detective also provided additional information to the police. Hella's client was a flight attendant for Pan Am who had hired Keith several months earlier to investigate her husband's extramarital affair. They discovered that her husband was having an affair with a flight attendant from Eastern Airlines. Upon learning of this, Hella began gathering evidence in preparation for divorce. However, recently she had disappeared and could not be contacted. Police investigation revealed that Hella had not been seen since November 19th, over 10 days before the investigation began, and her car was found in the employee parking lot at her workplace. Initially, the police did not pay much attention to this incident, believing it was simply a marital dispute, where the wife had decided to leave to relieve stress and would return home safely. Because the person accused by the detective was Richard Crafts, a pilot for Eastern Airlines, and also a part-time volunteer police officer in town who had no bad habits. Therefore, after receiving the call, they waited until the next day before sending police to investigate. According to Richard's statement, he and Hella had 3 children, and their family lived very happily. On the evening of November 18th, before leaving home, there was nothing unusual. They even planned to take the children to his sister's house to play, but the next morning when he woke up, he didn't see his wife anywhere. He speculated that she had received an unexpected notice to fly somewhere, as his wife was a flight attendant who often flew around. Sometimes she wouldn't come home for 10 days, which was normal, so when he didn't see his wife, he didn't feel anything unusual. At that time, the couple had a slight disagreement, both suspecting each other of having an affair and were in a period of argument, so they didn't contact each other. Richard's explanation sounded reasonable, but the police still felt something was not right. In the following days, they continued to focus on this case, and new clues kept emerging, making the situation even more perplexing. The incident took place in Connecticut, where Dr. Lee Chang-yu, an American of Chinese descent known as the contemporary Sherlock Holmes, was residing. He had been involved in solving over 8,000 intriguing and mysterious cases throughout his lifetime. At the time, the police wanted to resolve the case as soon as possible, so they invited him to join the investigation. Upon receiving the invitation, Dr. Lee immediately began his investigation. Initially, he started looking into Hella's relationships. It didn't take long for him to uncover some leads. The 19-year-old babysitter at Hella's home named Dawn Marie Thomas abruptly quit her job right after Hella went missing, which was quite suspicious. Dr. Lee quickly tracked down the babysitter and found out that she was not involved in the disappearance. However, during the interview, he gathered some important information. According to the babysitter, on the night before Hella went missing, she was awakened by a strange noise inside the house. At the time, she didn't pay much attention and thought it might have been something knocked over by the snowstorm outside. The next morning, Richard, the homeowner, reported that the house had lost power due to some incidents the previous night. In such freezing weather, having no electricity for heating was not ideal at all. Therefore, he decided to take the whole family to visit his sister's house in Westport, about 35 kilometers away from Newtown, where the family currently lived. At that time, the babysitter didn't see Hella and instinctively asked where she was and why everyone didn't go together. Richard replied that Hella had already left beforehand, and after arriving at their destination, he immediately left the others and drove away. By 7 p.m., Richard picked them up and returned home. During their time there, the babysitter did not see Hella anywhere. The day after, while Marie was cleaning up, she discovered a fairly large black stain on the bedroom carpet. When she asked Richard, she learned that it was motor oil, and he immediately cut out the dirty part of the carpet and threw it away. Marie felt something was wrong and fearful, so she resigned and returned home. Dr. Lee began to investigate further into Hella's colleagues and friends and discovered that Richard had given multiple different versions regarding his wife's absence. For instance, he said his wife had gone to Germany and would return after a while, or she had gone back to her hometown to care for her sick mother. When asked too many questions, he replied that he didn't know where his wife was. Some of Hella's friends said Richard often imposed dominance over the family, had a bad temper, collected weapons, and had extramarital affairs. Hella had also been physically abused by him. Some friends informed the police that before her disappearance, Hella had said, "If something happens to me, it definitely won't be an accident. I want a divorce as soon as possible." Based on the information obtained, Dr. Lee was certain that Richard was hiding something. Immediately, the police listed Richard as a prime suspect. They suspected that a conflict over the divorce might have led him to violently kill his wife. After further investigation, more unusual signs gradually surfaced. Private Detective Keith Mayo, who also felt something was amiss, began investigating. Upon hearing Marie's account of the carpet, he believed there must be significant evidence on it. After investigation, he learned that Richard's family garbage area was often transported elsewhere. He hired 9 more people and spent several days digging in the landfill, where he found a carpet that was identical to Hella's carpet at home, with a large stain still visible on it. Upon hearing Dr. Lee accept responsibility for investigating the disappearance, he immediately sent that carpet sample to the police for investigation. However, when the carpet sample reached the police, it was severely contaminated from being deep in the landfill. After checking, they couldn't determine whether the stain on the carpet was blood or not. When investigators checked Richard's bank records and phone records, they found some suspicious points. Credit card bills showed that on November 13th, before Hella went missing, Richard spent $375 at a store in London to buy a large freezer. Why did he buy a large freezer in winter? What was his plan? According to the investigation, the item he needed wasn't available in the store and had to be ordered, taking about 4 days to arrive. The store requested Richard to provide information for delivery, but he refused. 4 days later, he returned to the store and personally transported the large freezer home. After that day, Richard's bank card incurred an additional $900 fee to rent a certain type of machine. From contact records on Richard's phone, the police discovered he had contacted a company to rent a wood chipper. He claimed some trees had fallen due to the snowstorm in front of his house, necessitating the rental of a wood chipper to handle them. On November 18, 1986, Richard went to the company and rented the most powerful and largest wood chipper available. This wood chipper could grind branches and tree trunks with a diameter of up to 30 centimeters. On November 19, 1986, Richard's bank card note indicated he purchased a set of bedding for a new bed. By this time, it was evident that Richard's actions were highly suspicious. However, lacking concrete evidence and with Hella still missing, the police were unable to do more. By December 26th, nearly a month after receiving the final search warrant approval while Richard and his family were on a vacation abroad, the police immediately searched his house and found some suspicious points. Firstly, the carpet sample found in the landfill matched perfectly with the shape of the carpet in Richard's master bedroom. Secondly, they discovered some very rare bloodstains. Dr. Lee found 5 bloodstains that were hard to spot without careful observation located at the corner of the bed in the bedroom. After multiple tests, these bloodstains were found to belong to blood type O, matching Helly's blood type, and they were not menstrual bloodstains. Thirdly, in their bathroom, there were many large towels, and police discovered that several towels in Richard's bathroom reacted to blood tests. From this information, it could be determined that Hella was murdered, but where was her body? According to USA law, a suspect cannot be convicted of murder without the victim's body. Therefore, Dr. Lee decided to conduct a lie detector test on Richard. However, he successfully passed the test 3 times. So was Richard the real perpetrator? Dr. Lee still believed that his analyses couldn't be wrong. He suspected the lie detector results a scientific device used to record physiological changes like respiration, heart rate, blood pressure, and skin moisture when normal individuals are questioned to determine whether they are lying. In other words, if professionally trained, one could remain calm and pass a lie detector test. After further investigation, Dr. Lee discovered that before becoming a pilot, Richard had served in the Marine Corps and even worked for the CIA, performing various covert missions. This meant Richard was someone akin to James Bond in the movies, trained professionally in maintaining national secrets and capable of convincingly lying. Therefore, lie detector tests for Richard were simply routine. Just as the police were at an impasse after the lie detector tests, seemingly unrelated news suddenly appeared, completely changing the investigation's course. After the case was widely reported by the international press, the police faced immense public pressure. In this situation, Dr. Lee's investigative team discovered some unrelated events that provided a new lead. A few months earlier, there was an incident that made local residents uncomfortable. A man was continuously annoyed by the noisy dog from the neighboring house. This made him furious, and he caught the dog and threw it directly into a wood chipper, shredding the dog into pieces. This incident quickly made headlines in some newspapers, and gradually more people became aware of the story. The investigative team recalled that Richard had also rented a large wood chipper. After investigating and surveying, they found a witness named Joseph Hine, who was a snowplow operator on the highway. Joseph stated that at the time, continuous snowfall over several days had led to a significant accumulation of snow. To ensure smooth traffic, he was assigned to snowplow duty on the highway during the night shift. Around 3 a.m. on November 19th, he saw a driver passing by towing a large wood chipper towards the lake. The man also stopped by the roadside for a while. Joseph wondered why anyone would dare to face such a snowstorm to operate a wood chipper outdoors at night. It was quite peculiar. He was deeply impressed by this man. When the police showed him pictures for identification, Joseph immediately recognized the driver as Richard. With this new information, the investigative team speculated that Richard likely moved his wife's body to the lakeside and disposed of it using the wood chipper. Upon discovering this crucial lead, the investigative team immediately focused on Lake Zoar. After several days of searching, they found scattered wood pieces along the lake shore. Fortunately, along with these wood pieces, they also discovered some scraps of paper with Hella's address. This seemed to be the disposal site. However, Lake Zoar was vast and deep, making a comprehensive search akin to finding a needle in a haystack. Facing this difficulty, Dr. Lee devised a special method. He rented an identical wood chipper to the one Richard had rented before and purchased a processed pig. After freezing it, he threw the pig directly into the wood chipper using the distance that the pig bones were crushed and ejected to determine the range of body disposal. Ultimately, this experiment proved that objects ejected from the wood chipper could only travel up to 4.6 meters at most, with lighter objects found nearer the shore. This experiment provided a relatively clear understanding of how Richard could have disposed of his wife's body using the wood chipper. Based on these clues, the police organized a search team, dividing them into 2 groups. The first group searched along the lake shore using grid methods, while the second group consisted of divers searching in deeper areas. They also requested the authorities to lower the water level in the lake to facilitate the search. Finally, under meticulous police investigation, they discovered Hella's remains. Besides the remaining fragments after being shredded, they found a total of 2,660 hair strands, 69 bone fragments, 2 teeth, a piece of skull, a fingernail, a toenail, and various other materials. More importantly, they found an electric saw at the bottom of the lake. The investigative team also found some pieces of skin seemingly invisible to the naked eye on the saw blade, along with hair fragments and some green fibers that match materials found at Richard's home. However, the serial number on the electric saw had been carefully erased. Using a special acid, the investigative team restored the serial number, ultimately recovering serial number 5921616. After cross-referencing with Richard's purchase receipt for the saw, it was confirmed that this serial number matched perfectly. Furthermore, the hair samples were compared with Helly's parents, showing similar colors. At that time, DNA comparison technology was not available, making the identification of fragmented remains extremely challenging. The fingernail found was compared to a nail polish bottle on Hella's makeup table. Chemical analysis showed a perfect match between them. The police concluded that Richard had assaulted his wife at least twice with a blunt object in the bedroom to prevent discovery. He came up with the idea of disposing of his wife using a wood chipper, believing it would render her body unidentifiable. However, realizing the wood chipper couldn't shred softer materials effectively, he went to buy a large freezer to place his wife's body inside. Once the body froze solid, he proceeded to use an electric saw to divide it into pieces, then used the wood chipper to spray them into the lake for fish to consume, erasing all traces. On January 13th, 1987, the Connecticut State Medical Examiner's Office received documentation from the police and issued a death certificate for Richard, who had concealed the truth and was immediately arrested. This case caused a significant shock across the United States. Due to the widespread coverage of the case, it was transferred to New London for the trial in May 1988. Over the next 2 weeks, more than 100 witnesses appeared in court, presenting over 650 pieces of evidence. After a grueling 54-day trial of the 12 jury members, 11 found Richard guilty, while 1 believed he was not guilty, resulting in a hung jury. On November 21, 1989, nearly 3 years after the crime, a second trial was held in Norwalk with clearer witnesses and evidence. The jury concluded that Richard was guilty and sentenced him to 50 years in prison. On January 30th, 2020, after serving 31 years, Richard was released and moved to live in an old house about 32 kilometers away. He was released early due to improved behavior in prison. This case drew significant attention, not only because of the heinous nature of the crime, but also because it was the first murder case in Connecticut's history, where the prosecutor still brought charges despite the body not being found. Ultimately, the successful resolution of this case was not only due to Dr. Lee's intelligence, but also the dedication of every police officer involved in the investigation. Additionally, private investigators hired by Hella's family also made significant contributions, because behind every murder case there is at least one victim and one grieving family. How do you feel about today's case? Leave a comment so we can discuss, and if you liked it, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.